I'd like to discuss is to talk about why our peace that we currently enjoy is currently fragile. And this is framed in the context of US-China relationship and many other issues. But let me discuss some important background that compared with the situation during the First and Second World Wars, the world currently is at peace if we view peace in a negative or conventional sense, because there is a positive and negative peace. A negative peace is always viewed as the absence of war or absence of violent conflicts. But of course, positive peace will talk about presence of justice, presence of human rights and human security. But in a more conventional sense, we have been experiencing world peace since the end of the Second World War. And from 1945 to 1991, we enjoyed world peace because of the balance of power between the United States and the former USSR. It was the concept of mutually acquired destruction that led the world to peace. And peace was viewed in the context of the balance of power, in the context of military deterrence. And that was the kind of peace that we enjoyed from 1945 to 1991 during the Cold War. Of course, we witnessed proxy wars in several parts of the world in various regions where they experienced violent conflicts. But at the world scale, we enjoyed a sense of relative peace during the Cold War. But from 1991 to 2001, we enjoyed world peace through a unipolar moment led by the United States as a result of the collapse of the former Soviet Union. And during this period, we saw the United States as the unrivaled and sole superpower. That was the triumph of Pax Americana, and also the affirmation of democratic peace theory, because during this time, we saw the waves of democracy. Suddenly, many countries in the world, particularly in the developing areas, embrace democracy as their system of political governance. And with the sole superpower, we saw peace being maintained through what we call in the academe as hegemonic stability theory. There was a single hegemon maintaining peace and order in the world. And this was the highest period of American global power. And we relied on the United States as a global peace provider. Okay? And we regarded the United States as the global policeman. However, things have changed. 911 changed everything. This will never be forgotten because 911 demonstrated the limit and uncovered the vulnerability of American power. We thought that the United States was the Superman of the world, but we saw the vulnerability of American power and the limit of American power during the 911 terrorist attacks on the United States 20 years ago. So we found a lot of uncertainties after that, prompting scholars like Farid Zakaria to describe the world after 911 as the post-American world. It was the post-American world because it also happened at the time when we saw the rise of other global powers, the rise of other regions. And we also see the rise and fall of great powers, as already warned by Paul Kennedy. And the rise of others will be marked by the remarkable rise of a certain power that is being regarded now as the major challenger to the United States, and that is China. And in the post-American world, Farid Zakaria argued that American predominance is rapidly fading because of the rapid rise of the rest. The tallest building is now in Dubai. The biggest factory in the world is in China. The largest oil refinery is in India. The largest investment fund in the world is Abu Dhabi. And the largest Ferris wheel in the world is in a small state, and that is Singapore. And so we see that in the post-American world, others are rising. And the most remarkable rise of others will be the rise of China. And the rise of China is in fact creating trouble because it says that the rise of China can signal the end of the Western world established by the United States and its Anglo-Saxon allies in the world, and the birth of a new global order. And according to Martin Jakes in his book, When China Rules the World, China is now a crucial economic player in the world. And it's just a matter of time for China to play a big political role in world scale and eventually a military role in the international community. And this is in fact reaffirmed by various studies conducted by a well-renowned thinker, Henry Kissinger. He wrote a book, 800-page book on China and world orders, saying that China is in fact becoming a superpower that can challenge the predominance of United States power. And also in Asia, this is a narrative in Asia where Asian scholars would also call the situation as the end of American world order in Asia. And the United States wants to retain its influence in Asia, but that is fading rapidly because of a world that is becoming more multiplex. And we saw in Asia the decline of liberal hegemony that was established by the United States, and we see regions playing more and more active role in international affairs. So if you will look at the general trend, the global democracy is under retreat. There is now a global erosion of democratic norms. In the 1990s, it started from the 80s, we saw the third wave of democracies where suddenly countries in the world became democracies. But all these countries in the 21st century started to retreat, and now we saw the rise of authoritarianism. And we have felt that in the Philippines during the time of Duterte, and maybe in the future, if not prevented, we will also see the retreat of democracy in the Philippines. So from restoration of democracy, we failed to consolidate democracy, and there might be a democratic retreat, okay, because of these current trends happening not only in the Philippines but also in the world. Now, in the context of all these developments, will China rise peacefully? That's the argument. And according to several scholars, China is now presenting a new model of world peace that is not similar or not identical with the Western model or with the American model. We saw Pax Americana, but we also have this concept of Pax Sinica, a new world order of peace. And repeatedly, China is discussing in various publications, both scholarly publications and official publications, reaffirming the whole world that unlike other global powers like Germany, France, and even the United States, China's rise in the global affairs will be peaceful, okay, and benign. So that is the message being articulated by China. And so right now, we are faced with two contending peace models. And if you are aware of my presentation in AUKUS last week, I discussed about these two contending peace models, where the United States is advocating a liberal world order, while China is advocating a more inclusive, harmonious world order. Which of these two peace models will become dominant in the future? That remains to be seen. But there is now a fear of being articulated by many analysts and scholars stating that if the United States and China will not go along well as they see each other in competition, then they might suffer what scholars would call Thucydides trap, because Thucydides trap examined the Peloponnesian War that led to the violent wars between Athens and Sparta, and he said in this concept of Thucydides trap that it was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. Now, will the United States be fearful of the rise of China? So let's see if that will lead to the Thucydides trap. But we hope that the United States and China, in their growing competition, will escape the Thucydides trap in order to maintain peace and order in the world. But this is a work by Michael Pillsbury stating that, China has a secret strategy to replace America as a global superpower. And there's also another study, many studies stating that if the 19th century belonged to the United Kingdom with Pax Britannica as the peace model, and the 20th century belonged to the United States of its model of Pax Americana, the 21st century will be a century of China, you know, where we can see Pax Sinica in the world. But now we are witnessing what we call power transitions. You know, it's a transition where we see established power declining and another power rising. And power transition theory is about the cyclical nature of war in relations to political power in international relations. And according to power transition theory, war between two competing major powers can occur if there is a power parity between the established power, in our case, the United States, and the rising power, in our case, is China. Based on realist theory, when there's a balance of power, that's peaceful. But based on power transition theory, when there is a military parity between the established power and the rising power, that can, in fact, ignite a violent confrontation between the two major powers, especially if the challenger surpasses the dominant power and if the challenger is dissatisfied with its current power status. Now the question is, will the established power accept the rise of another power? According to power transition theory, there will be a peaceful transition to power if the established power accepts the rise of other power. Will the US accept the rise of China to have a peaceful transition of global power? Well, that begs the question, and we will discuss that later on. But will this lead to a new Cold War? And if you're familiar with my lecture last week, I said, no, what we are seeing, we cannot afford a new Cold War. What we're seeing is a condition of hot peace. It is a political situation where tensions between countries are real but unlikely to lead to violent war. The world has moved on from the Cold War of the last century to the hot peace of the current one. Now, where is ASEAN from this situation of hot peace? Now, we are advocating for ASEAN centrality in order to address all the issues facing Asia and beyond. Okay, that's in fact, right now there is a summit happening, and this concept of ASEAN centrality is reaffirmed. Will ASEAN centrality replace the United States? If you will look at this as a concept, okay, we see that ASEAN is very active in a lot of global engagement, and in the Asia Pacific, you will see the United States not very active in this following multilateral arrangement, you know, RCEP, ASEAN, and CPTPP. The US was absent, so there was some sort of a retreat from the United States from this global engagement, but the United States replaced it with AUKUS, which is a trilateral arrangement among Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States, and Quad, India, United States, Japan, and Australia. The question is, will this reinforce the existing San Francisco system where the United States has existing treaty allies that include Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand, Australia, and to include Taiwan also? So will the Philippines be torn between two major powers? So let's tackle that question later on in the open forum. But meanwhile, thank you very much for listening, and I welcome any interventions during the open forum. Thank you very much.